we cease to be a person. There's also those believe that we are a person after death. We become a person as well. Like the Christians believe that you can go to heaven, and that means that you're a person there. Or there's, different ideas. You, merge into an energy or a light or nothingness. So there's all these ideas there, right? Out there. So what Krishna says is that you will actually attain your personal form at your soul form, the form that you actually are as a soul. But right now we're inhabiting a material body. The soul is inhabiting a material body. So now we have this form, whether it's, man, woman, or transgender, or whatever. But there's we all have a form, a human form, that has designations, in the realm of duality. So that is not us, and it might be favorable for you to know that the body you inhabit now is not you. Maybe you don't like your body. Some people don't like their body. Or, man, I'm not that attractive, or I wish I was different, in this way or that way. I wish I was taller. I wish I grew up in Germany instead of America, whatever. You may have these ideas about your own birth. But nonetheless, any of the material forms, whether I grow up in India or in the US, or if I was a man or a woman, still I have to experience the sufferings of this world. So I have to experience birth, death, disease, old age. And these are the real problems of life. Particularly these four: Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, which means birth, death, old age, disease. So now the soul is inhabiting one of these material forms, whatever you happen to be. Us that are listening here are humans. There might be some ants listening in here too, which are also souls. And plants also have souls as well. So these material forms, not actually us, but after death, Krishna says, if you become absorbed in the absolute truth, or absorbed particularly in Krishna throughout this life, then at the time of death, you will actually attain your real spiritual form, which is nothing like this form, which grows old, it's disease, and has all these illnesses, and then ultimately decays into death. But you will actually attain a Satchidananda form, which means a form that's eternal. It's full of knowledge or consciousness, and it's full of happiness or bliss. So that is what Krishna says will happen in your perfected state. When you perfect yoga, you'll actually attain that state. Sounds a lot better, right? Form that's eternal? No? Yes? Form that's happy, full of happiness. It's nice, right? The body is not full of happiness that we have, the material body, because we have so many problems, like my wrists have been hurting me lately. I fell like last year, and but my wrists have been aching, and for some reason today, like my hips were sore. It's like, what happened? So we might just think that, well, this is, you might not think about it, but if you reflect on it, like, wow, actually, yeah, there's actually pains going on that I would not want to have, or I would not rather have if I had the choice. So in your perfected state, you won't have these issues. You'll be eternally blissful. So anyway, there's a lot of intricacies that go on to understanding what our eternal form is as a soul, but we're speaking mostly on the principle of not getting so much into the detail, but the principles of the existence of it. So So this particular verse, actually, before this, Krishna was explaining certain yogis that endeavor on the path of yoga, but some of them may not attain perfection. So Arjuna, who is, like the student in this dialogue, was asking Krishna, if I take the spiritual life, then that means that I am going to substitute my material endeavors for spiritual life. So that means that I won't be achieving some success materially. So if I don't attain success in spiritual life, then am I just going to be lost, without any sort of direction or meaning or benefit? So does that make sense? So Arjuna is asking, like we might think of it in our circumstances, like, wow, if I start practicing, bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness seriously, then that means I'm going to be giving up some of my material pursuits. So if I don't attain what the goal is in Krishna consciousness, then what am I going to be my position? And Arjuna says, am I going to be just like a riven cloud? They might look into the night sky. You might look into the sky and you see a cloud, which is all spread out. It's like, what is the word? I just mentioned it. Riven. I haven't heard that word before reading Bhagavad Gita, but like a riven cloud is just kind of like spread out. There's no shape to it. There's like no form. Usually when you see a cloud, very nice clouds in the sky, they have a form and, all these semicircles. It looks very beautiful. But then there's other clouds that are just like spread apart. There's not a distinct form. So Arjuna is asking that, am I going to be just like this riven cloud without any direction, any form, any sphere? Which means like, yeah, is it all going to be for nothing, basically, if I don't attain perfection? Of course, Krishna actually answered this in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He said, whatever endeavor you make in this path of yoga is never lost. It's your eternal bank account. So whatever you've made, you leave off with that. There's no fees involved that will decrease your what's it called? Decrease your income or your amount that you have, your percentage. It's like some banks, right? They have these monthly fees. So if you, maybe not savings accounts, but if you have like a checking account, if you don't have so much activity, then they charge you like $15 or $20. So it's not like you can just keep some money in there without satisfying this particular requirement. So it's not like that. So in spiritual life, it's like a savings account, and there's not interest increased, but whatever you have there is going to be there. So if you practice Krishna consciousness, you make it to 10%, and if you give up your spiritual practice, you go out in the material world and you forget about it all for lifetimes and lifetimes, still you always have this 10%. So you'll always be there. So more or less, all of us here have some sort of percentage that we've gained. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be here. In general, there might be exceptions, but in general, there's some progress that has been made. Or maybe you were very new to Krishna consciousness, so you received a book, or you heard somebody chanting, or somebody spoke to you about philosophy, or you read the philosophy, or whatever, you saw something online. There's some sort of progress that's been made in this yoga practice. Or maybe you did other types of yoga. So something's been done. And it's kind of interesting because Krishna mentions it here. He goes into, here in this later 6th chapter, he goes into points about like a little more detail about that, like what your next life might end up to be, because you've had this bank account, this spiritual bank account that's been accruing for lifetimes. So he explains that the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom, which is like taking birth in a devotee of Krishna's family. And so those are two of the options he gives, two of the avenues which one can attain. But there was also, after many, many years, there was another, I think it's later. So after short, that's after long practice, after short, yeah, this is for short practice. After some short practice, then one attains enjoyment on the heavenly planets, so to speak. And then after that, one can come to a righteous family or a rich family. But then one who's done very long yoga practice can take birth into a family of transcendentalists. So it's all positive, you know. Endeavoring for spiritual life is all positive. That's the point. Is that whatever you do, however much progress you make, is always going to be there. It's always going to be positive. Your future is bright. It's looking bright. Of course, that's us trying. If you try to just completely forget about spiritual principles and just try to enjoy the material world, then there's darkness, only darkness. But you still have that progress, which is there, but you're taking a big detour, and you might be able to escape, you know, having that progress have been made. You might be able to escape its fruits or its remembrance. Possibly, it depends on the individual and how Krishna decides to guide such people. So anyway, just endeavoring for spiritual life is all beneficial. Now you could say, well, if I start, you know, in this practice, we start chanting rounds or chanting on meditation beats, which is called japa. So if I start chanting japa and I start doing other spiritual practices of Krishna consciousness, then I have to stop doing particular material things that I was doing, like spending time on the internet or certain skills that you were trying to develop. You have to decrease those because we only have a certain amount of time in the day, right? So one has to understand philosophically that what is actually the goal of our existence. Goal of existence is to utilize the human form of life for its ultimate purpose, and Krishna explains that is actually to endeavor for devotional service or bhakti yoga and attain your original spiritual body after this life, to be absorbed in the absolute truth. That is the goal of our existence as human beings. So we have to understand philosophically that that's actually the goal, not these material things, which all of its progress ends simply by the end of this life. Like if you don't do any sort of, if you just do material, if you only do material progress, then what you're left with at the time that you leave this world is nothing. It was all for nothing. I mean, it was for something. Maybe some people want to leave behind a legacy, right? So, or a dynasty. We leave behind a dynasty that was in our name, you know, our last name or something. Or we leave a legacy for people, yes, this person was very charitable or very kind or very loving father or mother or sister or brother, whatever. Or we leave behind certain media, certain videos, artwork, whatever. So we could leave something behind that's material, but it all fades in time eventually, whether it's 100 years, 5 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. It'll fade away. So what was that progress really in the grand scheme of things? Materially, what was the progress really? Well, some people stop at, well, I just want to make sure my family has a good life. It's interesting. There's these anyway, so the point is that material progress more or less ends with the body. There's this example of Alexander the Great. When he left this world, he instructed, I don't know who it was, but somebody was taking care of his funeral to have his hands held like this, like open, when he was being brought in a procession. And so it basically represented that when you leave this world, you leave with your hands empty, even though he had so much gold, so much wealth, but he left this world with his hands empty. So, of course, we know about Alexander the Great. He's been, I don't know how long ago he was here, but he's a famous person. So that memory is there. But we didn't know him personally, really. We didn't know exactly what kind of person he was. So really, what was all that conquering for? And even though he may conquer nations, they get conquered in the future. So all your progress has been undone, so to speak. Maybe for a few hundred years, people enjoyed your what you left behind. So anyway, I don't want to exhaust the point, but the point is that objectively speaking, progress that you make material, it more or less ends in time. However much time, it will end. Whereas any spiritual progress, like I said, it's always there. Well, Krishna says, it's always there. And that's something that benefits you personally and others as well. So taking to Krishna consciousness is always a positive. And Krishna, what he mentions here in this verse is that sorry. Which verse did I read? 43? Okay. I looked at it, I was like, this is a whole different verse. No. So when one has taken birth in the family of transcendentalists, then they revive their divine consciousness of their previous life, and they're able to make further progress in order to achieve success. Now, there's a really cool story really nice story that's explained here. We'll just highlight it on Bharat, King Bharat. So there was a king named Bharat, and this story is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is it's got a sort of a historical book, or it's like the best spiritual encyclopedia. But it also has a lot of stories and philosophy and histories and everything. So this is a story from that. So there was a king named Bharat, and he was so wealthy, great conqueror. And he ended up giving up his kingdom to go to the forest and basically practice yoga. Not stretching yoga, but, different practice. I believe he was doing, at that time, altar worship. So he was actually quite learned, but he was performing daily rituals of religious rituals, you could say. And it just so happened that he was making a lot of progress, but there was this deer that was being chased, maybe by a lion, and the deer was, screaming and getting chased, and it jumped over a river, and it was pregnant actually, and somehow or other the pregnancy occurred at that moment, and this little fawn dropped, and later on the deer actually was killed by the lion or tiger. But the fawn was there, and this king, he became compassionate or empathetic, sympathetic to this newborn, and felt that, well, I should actually do something to help such a being. So the king raised this fawn, more or less. But gradually, the king started to give up his yoga practice, and to where it got to the point where he was not doing anything. So because of his affection for this fawn, this young deer, he ended up giving up more or less all of his duties that's the reason why he went to the forest, to attain perfection in yoga practice. But he ended up giving up by this affection to the deer. So he actually, in his next life, it's explained, he took birth as a deer. So because he was so absorbed in the deer at that time, throughout whatever years it was, at the time of death, he thought of the deer. So then he got a body of a deer in his next life. And Krishna mentions that in the 8th chapter coming up. That scientific process of your absorption of mind leads you to your next body. So now he's in the body of a deer, but because he made so much progress in his spiritual life, he actually remembered his previous life as a deer. Kind of interesting. You're a deer, but you remember the progress you've made. You remember who you were before. So that's very fortunate. So he didn't so much, he was in that body, and it's explained in the animal species of life, you basically just are controlled by the laws of nature. There's not so much free will like we have as human beings. There's not, you don't have so much choice over the actions you take, but you're driven by your senses, your form, just like, a dog acts like a dog, a spider acts like a spider, and a cat acts like a cat. You can't, they have that nature and they live it out. They're controlled more or less by it. Whereas human beings, we have the freedom to either live as animalistic life or to live a life which one is endeavoring for higher principles like virtue and spiritual life, inquiring into existential subject matters. The human has the opportunity for that. That's a special feature of the human form of life. So therefore we can understand that the purpose of it is for that. So he was absorbed in the deer, and so he became a deer in his next life. He lived out that life, however many years it was, and then his next life, he got the body of a Brahmana, or intelligent birth, like a birth of intelligent people, like it mentions here. Highly intellectual, great, very nice birth for practicing Krishna consciousness or yoga, bhakti yoga. But he also remembered his two previous lives as a king, and who more or less didn't make the mark for attaining his spiritual form, and then the deer life. And now he's in this Brahmana family, this Brahmana body. this rich intellectual, I don't know if he's rich, but intellectual form, good form. So he decides that I will move about this world as basically a dumb person. So he consciously decided that I'm just going to become like an outcast, like just a dumb person, so that I don't have to get involved so much into all the politics of the world and the social customs and everything. I'll just focus on my own, internal practice and absorption in Krishna consciousness. So he does that, but by destiny, he comes into contact with a king, which he was forced to, he had a strong body too. So he was forced to help carry this king on a palanquin. He had a few people on the palanquin already, and they needed one more. So he was there, and his name is King Rahugana, which was mentioned. So actually, his name is now Jad Bharat, and in his form now as Jad Bharat, he was carrying the palanquin, but on the ground he was seeing so many ants on the road, so he was trying to escape from walking on them. And because he knew that if I walk on this ant and kill it, I'm going to accrue some karma, which is going to keep me here in this material world. So he was doing like this, trying to escape the ants, and he was causing disturbance in the palanquin, because you can imagine people are trying to move forward and you're hesitating, you're kind of walking or you're sidestepping, and so you're not in sync. So the king was becoming very, very angry, and he started to reprimand the palanquin carriers. Of course, they all said, no, it's him, he's making this disturbance. So there was some dialogue, some criticisms from the king to Jad Bharat. But eventually, Jad Bharat revealed himself. He started to speak this high philosophy, this Vedic knowledge to the king. And the king he became so stunned. What? You're a great self-realized being? I just offended you so many times. I'm sorry. Let me hear from you now. What is the purpose of life? Actually, the king was actually quite well educated, and he was actually quite cultured. But he, in the moment of anger, he was angry with Jad Bharat. But this was his good quality, that he understood the saintly person is there, even though Jad Bharat was acting just like a dumb person, outcast. So he spoke this philosophy to the king, and the king appreciated very much. And I believe the story goes, after that life, Jad Bharat went back to the spiritual world. So it's an interesting story. There's more details to it, which I could share just a few words on it. But it just signifies this point that we have progress that we're making towards an ultimate end, which is to attain perfection in yoga practice, which yoga means to link with the Supreme. So we're achieving that gradually through our lifetimes, and whatever progress we've made, it's there, and it's eternally there. So we can't escape it. Well, escaped kind of sounds like, we're in a prison, but we won't ever lose it. In one sense, you could say, I can't escape it if you're trying to just forget about it. You may not be able to for some time. Some people try to forget all about the progress they've made, but it's already been made. So sooner or later, you'll remember, or it'll be shown to you. Okay, so are there any questions or comments about these points? We have. It's a good, and still know what the good is. Would you? I think no reasonable person would say, "No, I still want the bad." You know what I mean. So that's what Krishna consciousness is. It's good, following Krishna consciousness and the progress you make. You can experience the good, and without having to experience the bad, and you'll know what the good is without experiencing the bad. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't go through those things, like I don't grow old because now I'm, I'm in Krishna consciousness where I don't have to die. But no, I'm going to experience those things, but because my consciousness is being extricated or transcending the attachment to the material world, then I am not so disturbed when these things happen, when the natural course of the material nature takes place. And it's explained as an analogy that basically, in like the deepest core of our being, our conditioned self, ultimately we have a fear of death because that's our into this, existence that we can perceive, So for a devotee of Krishna, death is like a kitten and the mouse of its mother cat. Whereas when you are not a devotee of Krishna and you just live your life materially, death is like as if you were a rat in the mouse of a cat, or a mouse in the mouth of a cat. So the difference is the position is the same. I'm in the mouth of a cat, but the distinction is, you want to be a mouse or do you want to be a kitten? And if you're a mouse, that means death for you. That means suffering. But if you're a kitten, then that means you feel the most protected. You pass through that tribulation of life very easily in a protected way. So that is what happens when you become a devotee of Krishna. You'll be like a kitten and the mouse of a cat when you die. Sounds nice, right? I mean, I don't know what it's like to be in the mouth of a cat as a kitten, but you can see when you see these kittens, they're in the mouth of a cat. They're like, I've seen. Well, yeah. So yes, thank you. So that's the point. We have to understand things from a higher perspective when we look at this world, and then we'll see that yes, these experiences here have an unfavorable nature. Okay, so we're gonna thank you, Gio. So we're gonna have Arti, which is so we're gonna have an Arti, which is a traditional Vedic ceremony of worshiping the deity we have, and then that goes till about 5:40, and then we're going to serve out the dinner. So thanks everybody for coming. Please stay tuned. We're going to rise and go to the front. We're going to have some more kirtan and then some dancing if you like, and then we will be serving the feast after that, the dinner. So Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. And Gio will pass out songbooks. It's a song in Bengali that we're going to sing. So if you'd like to follow along, then you can see what the words are as well.
So this is on page number 29. Kiba Jayo Jaya Gora Chander Aroti Gashobha Janavi Tatavane Jagamanalobha Dakine Nitai Chan Bamigadara